This is Gemara Eruvin Daf Pei Gimel Shabbos is Daf. All the learning should be as chusser for Shleim of Yudimir ben Yakira Menu ben Vega Chaim Ram Chanita Chaim ben Sar Shalom Sibin Yizidol Sarvas Kenended Basim Chai Sar Yusachem Sarvas Yosef ben Mindol Eliezer President Shavalei Shalom Bas Nami Shavik Shavchan Faladavin Yitri with the Nebel Chan Rezol Liba Bracha Bas Tovia Musha Besoy Chali Yisrael. We pick it up on the bottom of Beis Amid Beis. We just finished discussing a bit of a complicated math calculation, figuring out this machlekes that we had in the Mishnah between Rav Yochanan ben Breika and Rav Shimon, exactly how large a loaf of bread is, how large a meal is, etc. Before we pick it up where we're actually holding, which is the end of the Mishnah, the last line of Pei Beis Amid Beis, which the Gemara says, Chatzi lebeis hamenuga, v'chatzi chatza lifsolas agvia, that half of that amount is the amount that's going to passel if your clothing moves into an area that is tamei, and half of that amount is going to passel if you eat tamei food, which we'll see in a moment. And then we're going to go on to Pei Gimel Beis today's daf. We have a beautiful picture over here. This is Daf HaChaim, courtesy of them. They did some great jobs here portraying all the different math for those who are perhaps like myself, that these complication fractions are not so simple. So you see in front of us, this is a beautiful picture of the machlekes of Yochanan ben Breika of Shimon, the top of Yochanan ben Breika. As you see, that it's showing us that the Eruvin Techumim is 6 beitzim, whereas according to Shimon, it is 8. And then it goes along. According to Shimon is going to be 5 1/3, and then it goes along to show us that half of that is going to be 3, and half of that is going to be 1.5. Lipsos like via, according to Yochanan ben Breika. According to Rav Shimon, the math is going to be it's 5 1/3 for the Erev Techumim, which the base of Menuga is going to be 4, which it points out over here on the bottom very nicely, which is what Rashi points out. That is the amount that we know Kedei Achilas Pras. We always know this is a shear, the amount of food that you eat, and the amount of time to eat a pras. That is the bread that we're talking about, which is, as you see over here, half a loaf of bread, which is 4 beitzim, and lipsos like via, that is going to be half of that, which is going to be 2 beitzim. So again, that's a machlekes Rav Yochanan ben Breika and Rabbi Shimon. And then now that is that. Let's continue. Says the Gemara, Tana. We learned in the Mishnah. V'chatzi chatzia, and half of that amount, the tamei tumas eichlin, is to make tamei eichlin. That if that amount of food, which again, that's the picture that we just saw, that half of that amount is if food touches it, it becomes tamei. But Tana Didan asked the Gemara, Tana Didan my tana tamei tumas eichlin. Why doesn't our Mishnah say that? Again, what did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah said half for the base of menuga to mivatami your clothing, and half of that lipsos like via. Why didn't the Mishnah give the shear for Tumas Oichlin? Says the Gemara, Misham, 3 lines down, Shavi Shirel Adadi. Because it's not precise, it's not exactly half. When the Mishnah said half for Beis HaMenuga, half for Lipsos Gevia, and now half for Tumas Oichlin, that last half is not precisely, doesn't fit out perfectly, as the Gemara now is going to explain. Titania, as we learned in Ebraisa, Kama shiur chatzi pras. What is the shiur of half a loaf of bread? Beis beitzim. That's going to be 2 eggs, says the Gemara. That's going to be 2 eggs. Chaser kima tivi Rabbi Yehuda. 2 eggs minus a little bit, according to the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yesi Amer, Beis beitzim seichakos. 2 eggs are loosely measured eggs. Again, both Rav Yehuda and Rav Yesi agree that a half of loaf of bread is 2 eggs. Just one says 2 and a bit, and one says 2 lacking a bit. One says 2 loose eggs. Shir Rabbi Beis beitzim soichakos. Shir Rabbi Beis beitzim va'oid. Rebbe says it's 2 and a little bit. So again, we have a little bit less than 2. We have 2 loosely measured. Again, every time we have measurements, you can measure it very compact, very tight, or you can measure it very loose. So that's the 2 measurements. And the third one was Rebbe. The Rebbe said it is 2 and a little bit. Says the Gemara, Beis beitzim va'oid. Kama va'oid. What's a little bit? Says the Gemara, Echon me'eser bebeya. 1/20th of a beya, so it's 2.1. So we just had 3 shirim. We have 2. We have 2.1, and we have 2 loosely. Says the Gemara, so that is the amount that these Manta Amrim hold is half of a loaf of bread. V'ilu gabi Tumas Eichlin, what do we find by Tumas Eichlin? Tanya, it says in a Braisa, Reb Nasan Rav Daisa Amru, Kebeya Amru, Kamaya Uklipasa. What is the shear of Tumas Eichlin? So what we just said a moment ago, it should be half. But what does it say? That what is the shear of making something tameh if you eat non tar food yitame, food that's going to make you tame. Says the Brayser of Nasan Rav Daisa Imru kebeya shamru kamaya ukli pasa. An egg and the shell. The chachamim imrim kamayu b'loikli pasa. The egg without the shell. Amar Rav Papa, Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Papa said name Rav Chisda Zudiv Rav Yudiv Rav Yosi. That's all according to the opinion of Rav Yudiv Rav Yosi. Av chachamim imrim kebeya umechsa seichekos. 1.5 seichekos. Uman chachamim, and who are the chachamim? Rav Yechanan ben Breika. It's Rav Yechanan ben Breika. So the Gemara just basically proved a bit, again, with the math over here, but the Gemara just proved that it can't be that Tumas Eichlin is not exactly equal to half of the previous year. And that is the reason why we did not list that in the Mishnah. We listed in the Mishnah that half of a pras is half of the pras are based on menuga, half of that is a psal sekvia. Why didn't it say half of that? It's not exact. As we saw, there were a bunch of opinions exactly what is chatzi pras. We saw that it ranges around 2, right? It was 2, a drop less than 2, rough 2, 2.1. And then Rabbi Yechim Breika said 1.5. But we see that half of that is definitely not going to be 1. And that is the reason why it's not going to be a precise amount. And that is the reason why, says the Gemara, we did not list it in the Mishnah. Pshita, the Gemara says the following is Pashit. Umar Chachamim, Yechim Breika. Pshita, says the Gemara, of course, answers the Gemara, it's come to teach us a din of Seichakais, that what the Chachamim said is 1.5 eggs, it's going to be 1.5 eggs measured loosely, not measured compact. Okay, that is the end of why we did not list that half of that amount is to be Metame Tumas Eichlin. Says the Gemara. Again, and let's just remind ourselves, this is because midaraisa, food does not make you tame. It's a din d'Rabbanan that when you eat food, you will become tame. What quantity of food you have to eat to become tame? That was the aforementioned machlekes. Since it was not precise in the measurements, that is the reason why we did not mention it in the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, moving along. Ki'asar Rav Dimi Amar. Rav Dimi came along and he said the following. Shiger bunyes l'Rebbe. Bunyas, the name of a person, sent to Rebbe Mudia de Kundis de Min Neusa. A Mudia of Kundis. A Kundis is a saw measurement from Neusa. Again, the important point here is that it says that it was a saw's worth. It was a saw's quantity. And now Rebbe gets this item, which is a saw. The Shia Rebbe. Rebbe measures how much is it. Me Oisan. Masayin Visheva Asara Bayin. Says Rebbe, he measures what a saw, and what's a saw? Masayim ve'esrim beim, 217 eggs. Again, we have an item, which is a saw, and Rebbe measures that it is 217 eggs. Says the Gemara, saw dehecha. What type of saw? And now we're about to see how very often the measurements of eggs get confusing. So you're going to see here there was a progression in the size of the egg. Says the Gemara, Eat midbarius, if referred to this saw of midbarius, the midbar eggs, kof mem dalet avoy. It was 144 eggs. Eat Yushalmi eggs, kof ayin gimels, 173 avoy. Vid the tipiris, rizayin avoy. It was 207. So we have 3 potential quantities of what is a saw: 144, 173, 207, but none of them are 217. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. Where did Rabbi get 217? Answers the Gemara, La'olam the Sipairis. Really was Sipairis, which we just said was 207, Asya. Asya Chalasa Shadi Aluye. Take off the Chala and add onto it. Chalsa Kame Havoy. How much is the Chala that you have to remove? Tam Neika. It's 8. So says the Gemara, you have to add on an extra 8 from the eventual Chala that's going to be removed. 207 plus 8 is 215. So that's where Rebbe got the number. What do you mean? Rebbe said 217. That's what Rebbe measures. Said the Gemara, Batzarle, you're still short. The Gemara says, you're right. Ela Aisi V'udais the Rebbe. Let's remind ourselves. What was the Shita of Rebbe? Rebbe held that an egg was not 2. An egg was 2.1. Rebbe was one of those shitas that we saw up over here, 5 lines from the top. What did Rebbe say? 6 lines at the top. Rebbe beis beitzim va'oid, and we say kama va'oid echel me'esrim. We explained it was 2.1. Says the Gemara, Al Aisi V'udais the Rabbi, Shadi Aluye. And now, so according to Rabbi, it's going to be 2.1. So every egg is 2.1 eggs. So therefore, the eggs of Tzipayri, which was 207, when you multiply it by an extra 0.1, it's going to get 217. Says the Gemara, but it's not really true. It's a drop more. Says the Gemara, you're right, it's a dot more, but since the difference is not a full egg's worth, we didn't measure it. So again, Rebbe got a shipment of an item which was a saw, he measured it was 217. Asked the Gemara, how could it be 217 eggs? We know eggs either 144, 173, or 207. Says the Gemara, it's really the 207 one, but Rebbe held that each egg is 2.1, and that is how you get to, as you see over here, this is a nice picture portraying what we just saw. Someone sent Rebbe a saw of 217. Asked the Gemara 144, 173, 207. Says the Gemara it's not 2, but it is. Okay, before we see there's a nice graph over here showing what we just saw, the story with Rebbe. This goes back a little bit. This picture over here depicts what we just saw a moment ago. It said chatzi for Thomas Eichlin. And we said it's an eighth of a loaf of bread. And you see over here, that is the machlekes of Yochanan and Breika and Rav Shimon. How do you get to that eighth of a loaf of bread? Said the Gemara that it's totally in how big is the quantity that you eat food. It's not going to be exactly half. As you see over here, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yasi, and Rabbi on the right side held it's 2 eggs. Yochanan and Breika held it was 1.5 eggs. Now this is the story that we just saw. It said to Rav Dimi, they sent to Rabbi something. Rabbi measured it was 217. Asked the Gemara, it's 144, 173, 207. Says the Gemara, it is not exactly 2. Why not? So according to Rabbi, it is 2.1. Rabbi held every egg is 2.1, so 207 times 0.1 is going to be 217. Tanu Rabbanan. Moving along to the second half of the Amud, says the Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan, further explaining, again, we just saw 3 measurements of this egg. It was 144, 173, or 207. Now the Gemara says, let's understand that progression. Tanu Rabbanan, saw Yerushalmis, the saw of Yerushalmis. Let's remind ourselves. Yerushalmi was the middle one. That was the 173. Is Yisera al-Mibar Yeshos is 6 more than the Midbariyas, which was 144. Shal Tzipairis, the Tzipairis ones, which was the largest, was 207. Yisera Yishalmis Shtos is larger than Yerushalmis Shtos, a 6. Nimsis, what comes out? Al Tzipairis Yisera al Midbariyas Shlish, that the Tzipairis, the 207, is more than the Midbariyas, the 144, a third. Says the Gemara, that's not true. 144 to 207 is not a third. So says the Gemara, l'shlish man. What are you talking about? If you're going to tell me what it means is a third of the midbariyis, again a third of 144, which is going to be 48. Mechti, says the Gemara, the math doesn't work. Shlish midbariyis kama hava Abraham timnim 48. V'ilu utfa shitenu tlas, and the difference between 144 and 207. The difference between the midbariyis and the tzipayris is 63. 63 is not 48, so it's not a third. Gemara says, you're right. Ella, you know what it means? Shlish to Yerushalmis. It means a third of the Yerushalmis, a third of 177. 173, I'm sorry. Says the Gemara, how much is a third of 173? 58. The chitzlasa minus a third. 57 and 2/3. Vilu utfei. And what's the differential like we just saw a moment ago? Shita nutlas, 63. Again, 57 and 2/3 is not 63. Says the Gemara, you're right. Vela de tipairi. It's a third of the tipairi. It's a third of 207, which is how much? 69. Shleshtida kamehave. Shivin echichada, 70 minus 1, which is 69. Vilu utfa 6 zamel gimel. But the excess is 63. It's still not equal. 69 is not 63. Elam Rav Yirmiyah Achi Kamar. This is what it means. Nimsei Saw shall Tzipairi. The Saw of Tzipairi Yisera ala Midbarius is more than the Midbarius. Again, the Tzipairi, the 207, is more than the Midbarius 144. Karov l'shlish shala, almost a shlish of itself, of the Tzipairi, which we just said, a shlish is 69. Ushlish shela, and its shlish, its 69, is karaiv limachsa de midbaris, is close to half of the midbaris, which is 72. So 69 is close to 72, but really what it means is, it really means 72 and a third, which is a third of 217, which is the tzipayris according to Rabbi. Ravina midi karav katani. Does it say that it's close? It says it's exact. Elam Ravina, says Ravina, which is what we just spoke about, meaning 69 is close to 72. Okay, but it's not that close. Elam Ravina achikamar nimsa shlish shel tzipayri b've'udiyos. A third of tzipayri of ve'udiyos. What's ve'udiyos? That's Rabbi Shita. That's every egg is 2.1 eggs. So now it's not 207, but rather times 2.1, which is what? 217. A third of 217 is 72. Shel Rabbi Yisrael al-Mechla shel Mibarius is more than half the midbarius, which we said was 72. Shlish beitza, a third, and now it's precise. Again, a third of Rebbe Sipayri is 217. A third of that is 72 and a third, is a third more than half of the midbarius. Half of the midbarius is 72. 72 and a third is a third more than 72. Let's just see one more beautiful picture over here. Here it shows you the saw changed over time. That in the midbar a saw was 144 eggs, and this is really, if you go through Rashi does all the math that a saw is 6 kav, a kav is 4 lug, and a 4 lug, each lug is 6 eggs, and that's the reason why if you do the math, 6 eggs times 4 lugs times 6 kav is going to get you 144 eggs per saw. Now this is actually, we can first see the picture before we see the next Gemara. The Gemara now is going to come along and prove this within the psukim. The Gemara is going to say, Tanar Rabbanan, ve'oimer is rishis arisei seichem, the first of your dough. So you're going to see over here that an ephah is 3 saw, and each saw is 6 kav, which is 4 lug, which is 6 egg, and that's why you're going to come out to be that the rishis, the asiris, the 10th, is going to be a 10th of an ephah, which is going to be 43, and it's 2.2 eggs. Let's see that right now. Says the Gemara, the last line of Begimel Tanu Rabbanan, rishis arisei seichem, the first of your dough. Moving along to Pei Gimel Amid Beis. Says the Gemara, Kedei arisei seichem, the amount of your dough. V'kama isei seichem, and how much isei seichem. And how much is your dough? Kedei isas hamidbar, the amount of dough that you had in the midbar. V'kama isas midbar, how much dough did you have in the midbar? The pasuk says, v'oimer, what was the oimer? Asiris ha'ifah, was a 10th of an ephah. Mikan amru. So what do we see from here? Zayin revayin kamach, 7 quarters of flour. Va'oid is chayeves mechala. That's the amount, the quantity, which is going to be chayev mechala. Shehein, which is what? Vav shel Yushalmis. That we're going back. And we're inputting it into all the other numbers, which is 6 of the Yushalmis, Shein Hei shel Tzipayri, which is 5 of Tzipayri. Let's just go back to that picture, and that's really what this picture is showing us. This picture is showing us that the asiris, the 10th of that ephah, is going to be 43.2 eggs, which is going to be, again, because if you do the math, the ephah, which is 3 saw, which is, each saw is going to be 6 kav, so that, which we know that how large is a midbarius. That was what we saw in Amud Aleph, 144 eggs. So therefore, if you do the math, 3 saw is going to be 432. 144 times 3 is 432. A 10th of 432 is 43.2, which is going to be the sheer challah. That's the quantity of dough. That's the 5 pounds of we have nowadays. That's the 2.25 kilo. That is the quantity of dough, which is going to be chayev in challah. Now the Gemara just ends off. Mikan amri, we see from over here. That's the quantity of bread one should consume daily, because all these numbers are coming from Rishis Arisei Sechem back Bizman HaMidbar, when the dough fell. That's the ephah that they got. Umevurach. Yes, if you have more than that, you're a glay, and it's just going to get ruined in your stomach. There's no reason for that. That is the end of these Gemaras of the math. And let's continue back into the Mishnah, which now we're going to get back into the sheet of Mivuais, the Eruvin Chatzeros that we were talking about before. Says the Mishnah, you have a Chatzer, you have a Marpeset. Very simple. You have people on the bottom floor. You have people on an elevated floor. They forgot to make an eruv. So what's the din? This should sound familiar. We've had this din before. Anything that's above 10 tfachim goes to the people on the top floor. The chatzar goes to people on the bottom floor. And therefore, says the Mishnah, we'll see pictures in a moment as always. If you have a pit or a sela or a rack, if it's 10 tfachim tall, so what happens? Then the marpeset said that the elevated floor is going to be allowed to use that area because it's 10 tefachim tall. Pachs mikan lechatzer. If it's shorter than 10 tefachim, it goes to the chatzer. But says the Mishnah Devar Ma'amurim Bismucha, it's only when this elevated area is samach, is close to the second floor. Aval b'muflages, but when it's far away, afilu k'vay yutfachim lechatzer, even when it's 10 tefachim tall, it goes to the bottom floor because it's too far. The top floor guys can't use it. Ve'ezi smucha, what does it mean close by? If it's not 4 tefachim away. Okay, so here we go. Here we see a chatzer, and here you see a marpeset. You have a bottom floor and you have a top floor. So what happened over here, there's a bunch of people living on the bottom, a bunch of people living on the top. The people on the bottom mean their own ear, the people on the top mean their own ears. So each one can carry in their respective areas. However, they can't carry in the other area because they did not make one joint ear. So therefore, we now have to figure out where is everyone allowed to carry. So says the Gemara, you see on the left side of this picture, you see these rocks. So these rocks, that when they're less than 10 tefachim, then it goes to the chatzer. You see in the next picture, this is another beautiful picture of this concept that we're seeing. You have people on the top floor, people on the bottom floor. And over here you see this cholias habar on the left side. You see that if it's above 10 tefachim, then it's going to go to the people on the top floor. Very simply, because they can use it, they can put stuff on it. If it's less than 10 tefachim, it'll go to the people on the bottom floor. It says, back to the Gemara, says the Gemara, Pshita, says the Gemara, the following is Pashit. We're going to have 3 Pashit statements, and then we're going to have 3 a little more difficult statements. This is really going to be a beautiful chazara of concepts we saw a few days ago. Says the Gemara, Pshita, the following is Pashit. Lezebe Pesach, Lezebe Pesach, if each one, to them, it is a Pesach, between 2 Chatzeros, as you see over here, Rashi points out that what are we talking about? It's not the exact case of the Mishnah. We're going to get to the Mishnah in a moment. As you see here in Rashi, Rashi points out, we're talking about 2 chatzeros that did not make an eruv, and there's 1 rishus in the middle. So that's what we're figuring out. Again, back into the Gemara. Pshita, if for each one, this area, which we'll define in a moment, is like a Pesach, that is like a window between 2 chatzeros. What does this mean? Let's do it with a picture. Here you see you have 2 chatzeros and you have a wall between it. What does it mean? It's like a window. It's less than 10 tvachim. Then the halacha is that it has a din of, I did not bring down that picture, okay, then it has a din of a window between 2 of them, which is what? That they're not allowed to use the area. They're not allowed to take on and off that area because it's an area that has a mixed gender. It's an area that's pulled by both sides. Both sides have equal rights in it. Therefore, you cannot use it. Says the Gemara further. Let's say each one could use this wall between 2 chatzeros by throwing. What does it mean by throwing? It means it's above 10 tefachim. It's tall. So if it's above 10 tefachim, hainu, what's that comparable? Sorry. It's like a wall between 2 chatzeros, which is above 10 tefachim. And again, both of them are equally, have a difficult time using it, and therefore they both are not allowed to use this area. Let's say it's deep down, it's in the ground, it's like the charitz case, it's a ditch, it's in the ground. Then, hainu, charitz being beis chatzeros, and again, they both cannot use it. Let's just see one Rashi over here. We'll see the first Rashi. Rashi says, "Hainu chaloin shebin beis chatzeros." Rashi says that Kloimar halami bailan my dine im asel shteim im mutter. We're not asking if that's a mutter. Hainu chaloin shebin beis chatzeros. It's not a question. That is the case of a window between 2 chatzeros. That we already learned. This was the chazara part. Ditzanan and dafay involved. Bu rot echem arvin rot shteim arvin v'im lo yervu b'yachad. If they didn't make one eruv, since this is an area that they both could use together, shneihem asurim. They're both not allowed to use the shtamish ba. If rishus al arba'i dein rishus b'chas b'dalit. So if there's an area that they both could potentially use, and they could have made one big eruv, but they did not. It's a doorway, and now they both cannot use it. So those were the 3 cases which are pashit. Again, this is less than 10 tefachim. Here you have a case where the wall is more than 10 tefachim. This is showing you again, kaisel shmein beis chatzeros is more than 10 tefachim. And now we're going to go back into the Gemara to 3 cases which are a little more difficult. Lezeb Pesach, lezeb is Rika. Let's say, for one side, it's like a Pesach. It's less than 10 tefachim. Well, lezeb is Rika. For the other side, it's what? you could throw it, meaning it's more than 10 tefachim. Hainu Rabbi Ravuna. That's like Rabbi Ravuna, which we've already seen, that it goes to the one that is the lower one. Let's just read two more cases, then we'll see the pictures. This is literally the exact Gemara that we saw a few days ago. Amar Rav Nachman. Hainu Rabbi Ravuna. Amar Rav Nachman. Case number 2. Case number 2, which is really case number 5. For this one, it's like a doorway, and this one you have to go down, meaning this one is less than 10, and this one it's in the ground. Hainu Rav Shizvi Amar Rav Nachman. That's the case of Shizvi Amar Rav Nachman. And lastly, Lezeb Sholshol, Lezeb Zrika. For this one, it's low down, and this one it's high up. Again, all these cases that the two sides of the Chatz are at different levels. What's the din? Amar Rav Shnei Masurim Ushmuel Amar Noisi Noisi Lezeb Sholshol. You give it to the one that goes down. Rav says they're both asur because neither one has a user-friendly usage. Again, in the first two cases, we gave it to the one that's more user-friendly. If one person is up above 10 and one it's below 10, we give it to one that's below 10 because it's easier for him to use. So we always go the one easier for use. But over here, it's not easy for either of them because for one person it's above 10, for the other person it's below 10. So they both don't have user-friendly. Says Rav, they're both asur. Says Shmuel Amar, no, you go to the one that goes down. Why? Because it's relative, says Shmuel. Says Shmuel, you're right that it's difficult for both of them, but it's easier for one of them. So we give it to that one. And that's the rule. So that's what Shmuel says. We'll give it to one that is easier. Let's go into the pictures. Over here you see the chutzner up top is higher, the chutzner low is lower. So one of them, it's like a Pesach, meaning it's less than 10 tefachim, it's easy to use. One of them is Mizrika, it's difficult for him to use. Or over here, similar case. On the left side, that's Rabbi Ravuna. This is actually beautiful because it shows us the picture that we saw back then of Rabbi Ravuna. So those people who their brains work in pictures, this should look familiar. And this is reminding us that was the din that we saw with Rabbi Ravuna. And also over here on the bottom of the picture, they show us the din that we give it to the one that's shaveh. Let's remember what does shaveh mean. Shaveh doesn't mean actually equal in these cases. It means less than 10. So the guy on the left side, since it's less than 10, it's easier for him to use. He's going to be the one that's allowed to carry it. Over here you see for one that's a Pesach, one that's a Shelshel, that the guy on the right is under 10, the guy on the left is lower than 10. That's a Shizvi Amar Rav. Again, the exact same case. The guy on the left, it's 10 tefachim. The guy on the right, it's lower than 10. We're going to give it to the one that's closer to him because it's easier for him to use. This was the third case, that one for Shilshal, one for Zrika, meaning for each one it's difficult. One is all the way down lower than 10, one is all the way up above 10. Then we said this is the case that's Machlekes. Rav says both asur, and Shmuel says we give it to the one that is a bit easier. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah. Actually, we'll pick it up from Tanan in Sunday's Daf. Everyone should have a fabulous Shabbos. If you're this after Shabbos, it should be a wonderful week.